Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, here we go. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Alright, this video is going to be a little bit more different than my usual video. It's kind of something off the cuff, a little bit more of a hot take. I'm kind of treading hot take territory, I feel, with this video. But it's something that I kind of wanted to get out there because it was on my mind recently, and I was like, okay, it kind of is pretty relevant right now. It's actually been pretty relevant over the course of the Switch era, really. But if you didn't already notice from the title, this video is of course about frame rates. It's about particularly with Nintendo and how they've handled frame rates in their games that have come out since the Switch launched, basically. And of course, we've had games that are 60 frames per second. We've had many games that are 30 frames per second. But from a Nintendo fan's point of view, I wanted to discuss how I personally feel about this whole thing. Because of course, when you look at the current gen systems, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, of course there are 30 frames per second games on those consoles. But more and more nowadays, we are seeing big games releasing in 60 frames per second. And we're just not really seeing that same level with Nintendo. And of course, we know Nintendo, and we know that they know how to leverage their systems very well. It's their own system. It's the Switch. They know how to work with that system because it's theirs, right? So you would expect first-party games to truly take advantage of the system, not just in terms of visuals, but in terms of performance. And so with the recent release of Princess Peach Showtime, which kind of hit the nail in the coffin, so to speak, like in terms of the point where I wanted to film a video like this or record a video like this. This game released, and of course it got decent reviews, and I did play the demo. I did not play the game yet. I don't know if I ever will personally. It's not really something that I'm personally into, but I still wanted to talk about it because I did play the demo. I do have some opinions about it. And so this game came out recently, right? Princess Peach Showtime. It got decent reviews. At the end of the day, people like the game. They enjoy it. It's fine. Did I enjoy the demo? I didn't finish it. I finished the Sword Fighter Peach part of the demo, and then after that, I just kind of gave up because I was just not really enjoying it. It was just not my cup of tea personally. Doesn't mean it won't appeal to anyone else. It's just not my personal cup of tea, even as a Nintendo fan and as a Mario fan. But the game is adequately fun. It was fun enough to keep me going until the end of the Sword Fighter session, and after that, I didn't even feel like giving the baking session a try. I didn't want to get into the patisserie part of it. I just wasn't really that into it at that point. But from what I've played, I'm like, okay, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and with this game coming out, I'm like, okay, all right, here we go again. I have to ask the question at this point, why is this game in 30 frames per second? I have to ask that question. Maybe it's because it's a budget title, right? Although it's priced pretty high, but I mean, in terms of the cost to develop the game itself, it obviously doesn't seem like a crazy big budget Nintendo game, right? But even putting budget aside, you know, we've had low budget games at 60 frames per second. I don't think that's much of an excuse. But I know at this point I'm probably going to be driving a wedge between a lot of people, probably. This is, of course, a topic that's fairly sensitive in some ways. I fully expect that I am not going to please everyone with this video, absolutely not. I may even piss a lot of people off, and I'm sorry about that. I'm apologizing in advance. I don't feel like I have to apologize because it's just my opinion, but I'm going to do that anyways. So, why is this game 30 frames per second instead of 60? It kind of boggles my mind. It really boggles my mind because it's not just this game. This game is just kind of the final nail in the coffin, like I mentioned, that made me want to record this video. But this has been happening consistently throughout the Switch generation, and when you see other AAA games that are releasing in 60 frames per second, again, not every game is, even on the other systems. Nintendo is not the only one dealing with this issue. I'm just noticing it more and more with games that don't have to be 30 frames per second, if you know what I mean. If you look at the game, if you look at it from a visual perspective, even from a gameplay perspective with not a lot of things going on at once, you have to wonder why on earth it's 30. And why they didn't strive for something much higher and better performance. The thing about 30 frames per second is it really depends on the game, because there's some games that can get away with it and still manage to look smooth. But for some reason, the 30 frames in this game doesn't really look like that. It looks very choppy. Even the cutscenes look pretty choppy as well. It's not a smooth 30. And this is coming from someone who has experienced games that ran at smooth 30 frames per second that didn't bother me at all. Like, for example, Doom 2016 on the Switch. That game ran, in my opinion, from my perspective, at a smooth 30 frames per second. That was a very smooth 30. And personally, I think motion blur had a little bit to do with that. I think the reason why it looked so smooth was because of motion blur. But even Doom Eternal, which removed the motion blur, actually still managed to look fairly smooth for 30 frames per second. So again, it's just the way they're presenting the game, Princess Peach Showtime, that really kind of bothers me. And I'm like, this game could be 60, but why is it not? And again, this is going to be a bit of a hot take too, but I am not blaming the Switch hardware. Not on this one. Maybe in with other games, for sure. Like what I mentioned with Doom. Obviously, it's in 30 because they had to cut the frame rate in half because it's on weaker hardware, the Switch. But with Princess Peach, there's just simply no reason for it to be in 30 frames per second. Like, I'm going to bring up a game that we all know that came out during the first year of the Switch's life. Let's talk about Super Mario Odyssey for a bit. That game looks outstanding. That is one of the best looking games on the Switch, bar none in my opinion. Like, flat out, fight me on that. It is one of the best looking games. It's one of the prettiest games, art direction top notch, visuals top notch, everything. All right, so you look at that game is 60 frames per second, and it has beautiful vistas, it has beautiful expansive environments, and it's just 60 frames per second. Basically a perfect 60. Like the Sand Kingdom, the Metro Kingdom, Bowser's Kingdom, all these kingdoms look outstanding. So let's take a look here. This is 60 frames per second. This is 30 frames per second. This is 60 frames per second. This is 30. Again, it's not really a big deal. Again, I am aware with these hot takes. I mean, I understand that I am probably burning bridges. I am probably making people upset by making this video, by expressing my opinions. But you gotta wonder, you just gotta wonder. It's not, I don't hate the game. It's not for me, of course, but I don't hate Princess Peach Showtime. It's just one little aspect of the game that I'm just wondering about. Why on earth are we playing this game at 30 when it could be so much more silky smooth at 60? And I probably, personally, it would have improved and increased my enjoyment of the game. I'm not kidding about that. Remember I mentioned earlier in the video that this is not the only time that I felt this way about a game, but this is simply just the breaking point for me. This happened before too, with a little game I like to call Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This game is outstanding. This is the first this is the first Kirby game in general that I have ever beaten from start to finish. Just in general. I've tried to get into Kirby in the past, but the 2D Kirby formula just isn't really... I just couldn't really get into it no matter how much I tried. I tried playing Kirby in the Amazing Mirror on the Game Boy Advance. I tried playing the original Kirby's Adventure on the NES, and I just could never really get into it and finish those games. But Kirby and the Forgotten Land was amazing, and I finished that game. Like, it was incredible. Great level design, great platforming, great transformations and power-ups. Great endgame. I won't forget the endgame of that game. If you guys haven't played it, the endgame alone is probably worth going through the entire game. But that game is outstanding. It's really, really good. And I enjoyed the hell out of it. But there was one aspect of that game that as soon as I started playing it, I was wondering to myself. And when I finally beat it, again, the game was outstanding, and I virtually forgot about my one issue with it. But then it came back again. And of course, you already know that issue for me was that it was 30 frames per second. Why? Why was it 30 frames per second? Once again, let's go back to the Mario Odyssey situation. Mario Odyssey is a far more expansive game where a lot more things are happening at once. We're seeing insanely, at least compared to the environments that you see in Kirby and the Forgotten Land, in Mario Odyssey, they're way bigger, way more expansive. And of course, this all can boil down to the engine that the game is being made on. Of course, I'm aware of that. A lot of Nintendo developers, at least from my perspective, I think haven't quite moved on from the game engines they were using for handheld devices like the 3DS. You could really tell this with the Pokemon games. But for the Kirby developers at HAL Laboratory, it's possible that maybe they're still using an outdated engine, right? To save on costs, and I get that. Part of the budget, I guess. You're going to use an older engine, but we are developing with an HD system now. We're developing with a much, much more powerful system that is capable of so much more, which is the reason why I'm not actually blaming the Switch for these reasons. I mean, you could argue that it is the Switch's fault, that if the system was no matter what more powerful, perhaps they would have been able to achieve 60 frames per second on that engine or not. It's possible, of course, but the point I'm trying to make is I don't actually blame the Switch because they themselves could have found a way to make it 60 frames per second while still keeping the image and visuals virtually the same. Again, the games look outstanding already. Mario Odyssey looks outstanding. Even Mario Kart 8 Deluxe looks outstanding. Why are these games at 60 frames per second and a game like Kirby and the Forgotten Land isn't? It doesn't really quite make any sense to me, except for the engine argument, but I don't know. That's just one other example I wanted to bring up. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I enjoyed the hell out of it, but there is absolutely no denying that I would have enjoyed it far more with a smooth 60. That's all I'm saying. I think because it's a platforming game, platforming games tend to require a bit more precision, a bit more precise controls, and a bit more accurate timing. Mario Odyssey, of course, had all that because it was more responsive because of a higher frame rate. Kirby and the Forgotten Land felt a bit sluggish at times, and I would also argue that that was the type of game that didn't actually have a smooth 30 as well, similar to Princess Peach. Not once did I ever feel like the 30 frames per second in that game was a smooth 30 that had no stutters or hiccups. No, it absolutely had hiccups and stutters. So there is no denying, despite how much I love Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I would have enjoyed that game far, far more if it was just smoother in performance. Even if it was a smooth 30 and not a stuttery and not a choppy 30, then fine, but even then, I would have absolutely loved that game if it was simply in 60 frames per second. It just would have made it that much better. Here's hoping for a next-gen patch, for a next-gen Nintendo system, the Switch 2. But yeah, I'm hoping down the road, especially for this upcoming Nintendo Switch 2, I'm hoping that Nintendo decides to update the majority of their engines that they've been using, particularly from their, I guess, quote-unquote, second-party companies, HAL Laboratory and this and that. I hope they're willing to update their engines for this next gen and not just keep their games locked at 30 frames per second, because I think they would benefit a lot from that. The games would benefit a lot from that. And in general, our next-gen experience will just be far better. I think if we regularly and consistently had games that had good performance, no, not even good, but like great performance, because Princess Peach Showtime has good performance. It's passable, but in this year 2024, I feel like it's kind of time to move on from that. I think it's not like I don't think we'll get 30 frames per second games anymore. I absolutely think we will, but I would like to see less of them, and especially for Nintendo's bigger franchises. Again, they were more ambitious with Kirby this time around. I would hope that they would be willing to improve the performance for their bigger games, at least. So anyways, guys, that is a wrap on this video. I hope you enjoyed my rambling. That was just a little bit of a ramble, but yes, I'm sorry if I pissed you off. It's just one man's opinion. It doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It's not even really a big deal. It's just something I wanted to talk about, get out there. I'm hoping Nintendo improves their performance. I'm hoping Nintendo improves this aspect of their game development in the future, the performance of their games. Even though a lot of their games do perform very, very well, I would like to see them strive for a little bit higher. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.